The glass of bourbon was untouched, sweating a perfect ring onto the polished marble countertop. My name is Jonathan Carter. I'm 41 years old, and until 3 minutes ago, I was a man who believed he had built an impregnable life, a fortress of success, respect, and love. The fortress was made of glass. It took a single text notification glowing on my wife's forgotten phone to send the first hairline fracture shooting through it. The phone lay face up, a silent bomb on the kitchen island. The shower ran in the distance, a steady hiss that underscored the sudden, deafening silence in our expensive, empty kitchen. The screen illuminated again, impatient. I didn't want to look. I knew, with a chilling, premonitory certainty, that looking would change everything. But I had to. We had a rule about phones. No passwords, no secrets. It was a rule I had insisted upon, cloaking control in the language of practicality, in case of emergencies. My fingers were steady, unnaturally so, as I reached for the device. The warmth from Emma's hand was still on its case. The message was brief, brutal in its clarity. Room 317, same as last time. Can't wait. The sender's name was a splash of acid on the screen. Vincent Larson. The name was a landmark in Denver, synonymous with skyline-altering developments and high society philanthropy, a man whose smile was perpetually in the society pages, always beside his elegant, soft-spoken wife, Clare. Inside, a tectonic plate shifted, a fundamental part of my geography, the map of my life I had trusted implicitly, sheared off and slid into a dark sea. But outside, nothing moved. My breathing remained even. I placed the phone back in the exact position, the exact angle I had found it. I poured 3 fingers of amber bourbon, the ice cracking like tiny bones. I did not drink it. I watched the condensation slide down the crystal, waiting. The shower stopped. The silence that followed was heavier, loaded. I heard the bathroom door open, the soft pad of feet on hardwood, the rustle of a towel. When Emma emerged, wrapped in terry cloth, her skin flushed and her dark hair dripping onto her shoulders, she was the picture of my wife, the woman I had loved for 12 years, the woman I realized, with a cold, settling clarity, I did not know at all. "What time is the Morgan portfolio review tomorrow?" I asked. My voice sounded normal. It was a minor miracle. She glanced at her phone, her thumb swiping the screen. I watched her eyes, those familiar green eyes I had woken up to for over a decade. They scanned the message. There was no flicker, no hitch in her breath, no flush of guilt or panic. Nothing. Her face was a serene, beautiful mask. 10:30, she said, her voice perfectly even. She was good at this, so much better than I would have ever credited. "I might be home late tonight," she added, setting the phone down and heading toward our bedroom. "The Gala committee meeting might run long." I nodded, the model of a distracted, supportive husband. "No problem. I'll grab dinner with Tom." It was the first lie I had ever told her. Tom, my oldest friend, knew nothing of my plans. My plans were only now, in this terrible, quiet moment, beginning to form. After she left, dressed for work with a kiss on my cheek that now felt like a brand of betrayal, I moved. I called my office, claiming a migraine. Then I drove downtown and parked in a garage with a sightline to her building. At 6:45 p.m., she emerged, not heading for her car, but walking with purposeful, familiar steps 3 blocks east to the grand entrance of the Warwick Hotel. I sat in the dim, concrete gloom of the garage, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, the engine off. Part of me, the raw, wounded animal part, wanted to sprint across the street, take the elevator to the 3rd floor and break down the door to room 317, to see it for myself, to confront the horror and have it done. But I didn't move. Emotion, I had learned through years in the pit of investment banking, was the enemy of strategy. Rage was a luxury. Heartbreak was a distraction. What I needed now was the cold, precise calculus of damage assessment and strategic response. I started the car and drove not home, but to Brady's, a dive bar near the cramped apartment where Emma and I began our life together. The bartender, Mike, remembered me. His hair was grayer, but his eyes held the same weary wisdom. "Jonathan Carter, been a while." I agreed, sliding on a stool that felt like a relic from a past life. "Bourbon, neat." He poured a generous measure. "Celebrating something?" I took a long swallow, letting the fire scorch a path through the ice forming in my chest. "The opposite." He nodded, not pressing. He'd seen it all in 30 years behind the stick. After the third drink, the world had sharpened into a point of grim resolution. I made a call to Barry Hoffman, an ex-cop turned private investigator who owed me a considerable favor. "I need surveillance," I said when he answered, my voice flat. "My wife." I paused, watching a couple at the end of the bar laugh, their heads close together. "And Vincent Larson." Barry's low whistle hissed through the phone. "The Vincent Larson? Jesus, John. Can you do it?" "Yeah, I can do it, but are you sure you want to know? Sometimes knowing is the point of no return." I watched the neon beer sign flicker against the dark window. "I already know, Barry. What I need is proof." For the next 2 weeks, I inhabited a bifurcated existence. By day, I was Jonathan Carter, devoted husband. I made coffee, asked about her work, listened to the minutiae of her day, all of it now a complex web of lies I was beginning to decipher. I kissed her goodbye, smelling her perfume, now wondering if he had bought it for her. At night, while she was working late, Barry's updates would arrive. Cryptic texts, grainy photos, timestamps that mapped out a second shadow life. The hardest part wasn't the deception, it was the performance of normalcy. Watching her choose her lingerie in the morning, knowing it was selected for him. Listening to her complain about a difficult donor, knowing the donor likely was a cover for an afternoon at the Brown Palace. Lying beside her in the king-sized bed we'd bought together, the space between us now a chasm filled with ghosts, wondering if the rhythm of her breathing meant she was asleep or thinking of his hands on her. One evening, as we prepared for a dinner with my colleagues, she emerged from our walk-in closet in a cobalt blue silk dress that clung to her in a way that was both elegant and profoundly intimate. It was new. I had never seen it before. "New dress?" I asked, adjusting my tie in the mirror, meeting her eyes in the reflection.
"This? No, I've had it for ages," she said, smoothing the fabric with a casualness that was masterful. "Just haven't worn it in a while." I knew it was a lie. Barry had provided a photo of them outside Neiman Marcus 2 Saturdays prior, followed by a shot of Vincent handing a clerk a black credit card. I'd seen the digital receipt. $1,500. I looked at her, the woman who had once cried with joy over a cheap bracelet I bought her in college, and felt a surge of something so dark it frightened me. "You look beautiful," I told her, and the terrible truth was, I meant it. The betrayal hadn't erased her beauty, it had weaponized it. At dinner, she was flawless, charming my boss, remembering his wife's recent hip surgery, laughing at the appropriate moments. All the while, my mind was scrolling through the photos Barry had sent that afternoon. Emma and Vincent in a hotel elevator, his mouth on her neck, her fingers tangled in his hair. The look on her face, one of abandonment I hadn't seen in years. The disconnect was surreal, a schizophrenic nightmare played out over seared scallops and expensive Cabernet. "Jonathan, are you with us?" My boss, Richard, was staring at me, a question hanging in the air. I snapped back, fabricating an answer about municipal bonds. Emma placed a comforting hand on my arm, a gesture that once would have centered me, now felt like a lie made flesh. Later, in the car, the silence was a thick, living thing. She reached over, her hand on my thigh. "You were quiet tonight. Everything okay?" "Just tired," I lied. "Big presentation tomorrow." She nodded, accepting the fiction. "Want to take a bath together when we get home? I could give you a massage." The image of her hands on my skin, hands that had explored him hours before, made my stomach clench. "Rain check," I said, forcing a smile. "I really should review my notes." A flicker of relief crossed her features, so brief I might have imagined it if I weren't looking for it. Of course, I thought coldly. You understand perfectly. An open evening to text him, to replay your afternoon, to plan your next meeting in room 317. The evidence mounted with depressing efficiency. Hotels, timestamps, room service charges for two, a 7-month parallel life, meticulously documented. But then, Barry uncovered something deeper, something that transformed my personal vendetta into something with far greater stakes. Vincent Larson is in trouble, Barry announced one night in his cluttered, cigarette-scented office. Deep existential trouble. What kind? Financial. He slid a folder across the desk. His company is a shell game. He's been using new investor money to pay fake returns to old investors, covering catastrophic losses in several flagship developments. He's falsifying reports, moving money between accounts. It's a Ponzi scheme, John. A big, fat, billion-dollar Ponzi scheme. I flipped through the documents, my banker's mind immediately grasping the scale. How solid is this? Solid enough that the SEC has a quiet task force on him, but these things move like glaciers. Meanwhile, he's still collecting investments, still living like a king. He paused, and still sleeping with your wife. I closed the folder. The pieces, terrible and perfect, clicked together in my mind. This was no longer just about a marriage. It was about justice on a grander scale. Vincent Larson hadn't just stolen my wife. He was stealing from hundreds, maybe thousands of people. He was a predator in a custom suit. So, Barry asked, his eyes keen, what are you going to do? I looked at the grainy surveillance photo of Vincent, his arm around Emma as they entered a hotel. I'm going to get creative. The plan began that night, as Emma slept the untroubled sleep of the convincingly duplicitous beside me. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the architecture of revenge taking shape in the dark. He had taken something precious from me. I would take everything from him, not just his freedom, but his reputation, his legacy, his smug sense of invincibility. The first step was Clare Larson. Finding her was simple. She volunteered at the Denver Art Museum every Wednesday. I waited until her tour ended, then approached her in the nearly empty museum cafe. She was alone, sipping tea, studying a catalog. Up close, she was more striking than I remembered, with an intelligence in her blue eyes that her public, placid smile often obscured. Mrs. Larson, I'm Jonathan Carter. Recognition dawned, followed by polite curiosity. Emma's husband. We've met. May I join you? She gestured to the chair. I placed a plain manila envelope on the table. Before you open this, I said, my voice low, I want you to know I struggled with whether to bring it to you, but you deserve the truth. Her elegant hands were steady as she opened the clasp. Inside were 5 photographs, curated from Barry's least ambiguous work. The first, Emma and Vincent entering the Warwick. The last, a passionate kiss in an elevator, his hand possessively on her hip. She examined each one with detached focus as an art appraiser, her expression not changing until she reached the final image. Then, a single tear escaped her perfect makeup. She wiped it away with an impatient finger. I've known something was wrong, she whispered, her voice taut. The late nights, the secrecy, the distance. A bitter, hollow laugh escaped her. I suppose working late took on a new meaning. There's more, I said, and slid a second envelope across the table. This one contained the financial findings. As she read, her composure truly fractured. Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God, he's going to prison. Yes, it's inevitable. She looked up, her eyes sharp, all traces of the sad society wife gone. Why show me this? Why not just divorce your wife and let Vincent sink in his own mess? I leaned forward. Because that's not enough. They betrayed us, humiliated us, and operated with utter impunity. I don't just want my marriage to end. I want them to face what they've done, publicly, in front of the world they value so much. Her gaze narrowed. The charity gala in 3 weeks. Emma is coordinating it. Vincent is being honored as the top donor. I nodded slowly. I want to expose them, to everyone, and I want to do it with you by my side. The silence stretched, filled with the distant echo of footsteps on marble. She stared at me, weighing, calculating. Finally, she took a deep breath. My friends call me Clare, she said, her voice now clear and strong, and if we're going to destroy my husband together, we should be on first-name basis. Our alliance was forged in that moment. We became conspirators, meeting in anonymous coffee shops, using burner phones. I learned she was far from the passive victim. She was a former environmental attorney who had subjugated her own ambitions for Vincent's. She was sharp, strategic, and simmering with a rage that matched my own.
The game escalated dangerously when Vincent, sensing a threat, sent an emissary. I was accosted in my office parking garage by a man named Reeves, all cold eyes and implied violence, offering discretion in exchange for my silence. The $50,000 cash withdrawal made sense. It was a test, a first offer. I looked at Reeves, at the hand he placed on my chest, and felt not fear, but a clarifying fury. "Tell your boss he can't buy me and he can't scare me," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "If anything happens to me, the SEC gets every document I have. He's not dealing with a cuckolded husband anymore. He's dealing with a problem he can't intimidate." The night before the gala, the tension in our home was a physical presence. I finally spoke the words aloud. "Room 317 at the Warwick must have quite a view." The blood drained from Emma's face. The denials, the gaslighting, the eventual tearful confession, it was all a pathetic script. She even had the audacity to claim Vincent was leaving Clare for her, that they had a future. I almost pitied her then. She was just another asset in Vincent's fraudulent portfolio, about to be rendered worthless. The night of the Denver Charity Gala arrived, a glittering spectacle of wealth and hypocrisy. Clare met me 2 blocks away. When she stepped into my car, I barely recognized her. Gone was the subdued elegance. She wore a fiery red gown that demanded attention, her hair and makeup transformed. She was no longer the wounded wife. She was a warrior in designer silk. "Tonight isn't about being tasteful," she said, her eyes hard. "It's about being seen." And seen we were. Our arm-in-arm entrance on the red carpet sent shockwaves through the crowd. The whispers were audible. I saw Emma freeze mid-sentence, her clipboard slipping in her grip. Across the room, Vincent, holding court with investors, did a double-take, his confident smile freezing into a rictus of panic. We took our seats at the head table, a move Clare had orchestrated. The dinner was an exquisite torture. Clare was radiant and cutting, showering me with attention, laughing at my jokes, while treating Vincent with icy politeness. Emma, seated opposite, looked like she was swallowing glass with every bite. Vincent drank heavily, his eyes darting between us, trying to decipher the threat. When the museum director stood to begin the honors presentation, Vincent had the look of a man walking a plank he just noticed was sawn through. The lights dimmed, the screen lit up with the usual laudatory montage, then, seamlessly, it morphed. Vincent's own voice from a business interview filled the room. What I've learned is that perception is everything. The screen showed him and Emma entering the Warwick. Gasps erupted. A wine glass shattered. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. The public sees what we want them to see. Now came the financial documents. Bank transfers, falsified balance sheets, the grim arithmetic of fraud. The crowd's murmur grew into a roar of confusion and anger. Investors shot to their feet. "Turn it off! This is fabricated!" Vincent bellowed, but the video rolled on, an unstoppable avalanche of truth. As the final damning image faded, I stood, lifting my glass in the stunned silence. "To truth," I said, my voice carrying, "and to consequences." On cue, the massive ballroom doors swung open. A phalanx of SEC agents and Denver police officers marched in, their footsteps echoing on the parquet floor. The lead agent, a woman with an implacable face, made straight for our table. The arrest was swift, the reading of rights a stark, formal counterpoint to the evening's opulence. Vincent was led away in handcuffs, shouting threats and denials that were swallowed by the uproar. Emma was sobbing, grabbing at my sleeve. "Jonathan, please, tell me you didn't do this." I looked down at her, at the ruin of the life we'd built. "You made your choice, Emma. Now live with it." Clare appeared at my side, slipping her arm through mine. "Shall we go?" she asked, a quiet triumph in her eyes. We walked out together, leaving the chaos behind us. The cool night air was the sweetest thing I'd ever tasted. The fallout was nuclear. Vincent's empire collapsed within days, his name a synonym for fraud. Emma lost her job, her reputation, and eventually, through a divorce that was mercifully swift, her place in my life. In the month that followed, Claire and I navigated the aftermath cautiously. Ours was a bond forged in fire, and we took care not to mistake shared trauma for love, though something deeper and more resilient began to grow between us. She launched the Denver Truth Project, turning her pain into purpose, helping others fleeced by men like Vincent. I found a grim satisfaction in watching the legal machinery grind him down, resulting in a 12-year prison sentence. One evening, a year after the gala, we stood on the balcony of Claire's new condo, looking at a skyline that no longer bore Vincent Larson's name. The mountains were dark silhouettes against a twilight streaked with orange and purple. "Do you think we'll ever fully trust again?" Claire asked, her voice soft. I thought of the long, painful year, the lies uncovered, the masks removed, the strength we'd both found in the wreckage. I looked at her not as an accomplice in revenge, but as a woman of remarkable resilience. "I think we already do," I said, and it felt like the truest thing I'd said in a very long time. Some say revenge is a dish best served cold. They're wrong. True reckoning is the white-hot blaze of truth, incinerating lies and lighting the way forward through the ashes. It's the fortitude to stand when you are meant to fall. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, it is the unexpected hand that finds yours in the smoke, ready to walk with you, step by careful step, into whatever comes next. The silence after my words was not empty, but full. The Colorado sky, vast and indifferent, stretched above us, a tapestry of deepening blue and the first pinpoint stars. Claire's shoulder was warm against mine, a solid, real point of contact in a world that had for so long felt like shifting sand. The city lights of Denver twinkled below, a galaxy of human endeavor, oblivious to the small, personal cataclysm that had reshaped two lives on this balcony. "I think we already do," I had said, and as the words faded, I realized their profound weight. Trust wasn't a blanket you could wrap yourself around. It was a thread, fragile and new, spun daily from small truths, kept promises, and the choice to be vulnerable when every instinct screamed for armor. We were spinning that thread, Claire and I, with deliberate, cautious hands. She turned her head, her profile etched against the twilight. Her voice was barely above a whisper, as if the city might overhear and judge our fragile progress. "It doesn't feel like trust sometimes," she admitted, as if the city might overhear and judge our fragile progress. "Maybe that's the only place real trust can start, not from innocence, but from seeing the damage and choosing not to add to it." She leaned into me then, a slight increase of pressure that spoke volumes. We stayed like that as the last of the light bled from the sky, the chill of the high-altitude night beginning to seep through the glass doors behind us. The past year had been a study in controlled detonation and careful excavation. My divorce from Emma was finalized, with a stark, bureaucratic finality that felt both anticlimactic and profoundly relieving. She had moved to Phoenix, a geographic escape that I hoped for her sake would become an emotional one as well. The settlement had been fair, perhaps more than fair, but it was a severance package, not a continuation. Our shared history was now a closed ledger. Vincent's world had imploded with spectacular public fury. His guilty plea and subsequent sentencing were front-page news for a week, then fodder for business section analyses for a month after. The scale of the fraud was so audacious, it became a case study in hubris. Clare, to her immense credit, had navigated the storm of notoriety with steely grace. She had cooperated fully with authorities, provided documents, and quietly, firmly disentangled herself from the wreckage. The Denver Truth Project was more than a philanthropic endeavor. It was her declaration of independence, her way of reclaiming the narrative from the ashes of Vincent's lies. My own life had undergone a quieter but no less total renovation. I had taken a sabbatical from the bank, a move that raised eyebrows but felt absolutely necessary. The relentless, high-stakes poker game of investment banking, which I had once thrived on, now felt hollow, a game played with chips that had lost their value. I found myself, for the first time in 2 decades, asking what I actually wanted to build, rather than what deal I wanted to close. I'd started consulting, using my expertise to help small businesses and legitimate startups navigate funding, the antithesis of Vincent's world of smoke and mirrors. It paid less, but the sleep was deeper, untroubled by the specter of forgotten phones or phantom hotel room numbers. Inside, Claire stirred. "It's getting cold, and I have a 7 a.m. conference call with the foundation's board." We moved back into the warmth of her condo. It was a space that reflected her. Clean lines, vibrant art from local galleries, books stacked on tables, a far cry from the cold, curated opulence of the Larson penthouse. I poured us both a glass of water from the kitchen filter. The domesticity of the act was still novel, charged with a meaning it never carried in my old life. "The board meeting is about the Parker case, isn't it?" I asked, setting her glass down on a coaster. She sighed, running her hair through her hair. "Yes, 72 retirees, their pension fund evaporated by a green energy startup that was just a funnel to a Caribbean bank account. It's a mess. The paper trail's a nightmare." There was fire in her eyes, the good kind, the kind that sought justice, not vengeance. "I could take a look at the financials tomorrow," I offered, "see if there's a pattern the forensic accountants might have missed." She smiled, a genuine, weary, grateful smile. "You've done so much." "It's not a favor, Claire. It's what I do, and it's what you're doing. We're on the same side." The words hung between us. The same side. It was a novel concept. For so long, it had felt like Emma and Vincent were on one side of a vicious, hidden game, and Claire and I were on the other, scrambling to even learn the rules. Now, there was no game, just life. Messy, complicated, forward-moving life. A week later, I was knee-deep in spreadsheets for the Parker case, the glow of my laptop the only light in my home office. The silence of the big house still felt too expansive, too full of echoes, but it was losing its power to unsettle me. I was making the space my own, slowly. A bookshelf here, a different chair there. The process felt less like erasure and more like reclamation. My phone buzzed, an unknown number with a Denver area code. I let it go to voicemail, a habit I'd developed post-scandal. A minute later, it buzzed again with a notification. A voicemail had been left. Curiosity, that old, dangerous driver, got the better of me. I put it on speaker while I continued to trace a suspicious series of transfers. The voice that filled the quiet room was like a ghost walking over my grave. It was Emma. "Jonathan. Hi, it's me." A long pause filled with the sound of her breathing. She sounded tired, stripped of the polished confidence she had always wielded like a shield. "I'm in town, just for a day, settling some final paperwork with the old lawyers. I wondered if you might have time for coffee. Not to rehash anything, God, no. Just, I feel like I left so much unsaid, and not just the bad stuff. There's closure, I guess. Or maybe I just want to see your face and know you're okay, that I didn't completely destroy a good man. You can say no, I'll understand. I had to ask." The message ended. The spreadsheet blurred in front of me. A cold, tight band constricted around my chest. Closure. The word felt cheap, insufficient. What closure could there be from a betrayal that had fundamentally altered my tectonic plates? And yet, the pull was there, the morbid curiosity, the unfinished sentence. The part of me that had loved her for 12 years, the part that wasn't a strategist or a survivor, but simply a man who had shared a life, stirred uneasily. I didn't call back. I sat in the dark for an hour, the financial fraud in front of me forgotten. I thought of the blue dress, of her laugh over cheap wine at Brady's, of the way she used to hum absently while making breakfast. Those memories were real too. They existed alongside the elevator photos and the hotel receipts. They were the foundation of the fortress that had crumbled. Could you look at the ruins without feeling something? The rational part of my brain, the part that had engineered Vincent's downfall, screamed a warning. Nothing good comes from this. She is a trigger for pain. She is a reminder of your own blindness. She is the past. But another part, a quieter, more stubborn part, argued that maybe the final step in moving forward wasn't about building higher walls, but about calmly surveying the ruins, understanding their layout, and walking away for the last time with no lingering questions. I thought of Clare, of our treaty, of the fragile, precious trust we were building. Would seeing Emma be a betrayal of that? I didn't know. I only knew that the ghost had knocked, and I could no longer pretend I hadn't heard it. The next morning, after a sleepless night, I texted the unknown number. 11 a.m., the Mercury Cafe, 1 hour. Her reply was almost instantaneous. Thank you. I'll be there. The Mercury Cafe was a deliberate choice. It was neutral territory, nowhere we'd ever gone as a couple. It was bustling, noisy, full of students and artists, a world away from the hushed, expensive spaces we used to inhabit. I arrived early, snagging a small table in the corner with a clear view of the door. My heart was a dull, heavy drum in my chest.
She was 5 minutes late. When she walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Not because she looked bad, she didn't. She looked ordinary. Her hair was shorter, simpler. She wore jeans, boots, and a plain sweater, a far cry from the designer armor she used to don. She looked thinner, her face bare of the makeup she used to apply with such precision. She scanned the room, her eyes finding mine. There was no smile, just a nervous acknowledgement. She slid into the chair opposite me, setting a simple tote bag on the floor. Hi. Emma. An awkward silence descended, filled by the hiss of the espresso machine and the chatter around us. She ordered a tea. I already had a black coffee, cold and untouched. You look well, she finally said, her eyes not quite meeting mine. So do you. It wasn't entirely true. She looked stripped down, real in a way she hadn't in years. It was unsettling. Phoenix is hot and bright. It's a good place to not think sometimes. She played with the paper sleeve from her tea bag. I heard about Clare's foundation. It's doing good work. It is. Another silence, thicker this time. This was a mistake, a painful, awkward mistake. I'm not here to ask for anything, Jonathan, she blurted out, finally looking at me. Her green eyes, once so familiar, were filled with a raw sorrow I'd never seen before. Not the performative tears of the Gala, but something deeper, quieter. I needed to look you in the eye and say, I am so sorry. Not for getting caught, not for the scandal, for the years of lies, for the 1,000 tiny betrayals that led to the big one, for making you live in a fiction, for stealing your reality. The words landed, not with the explosive impact I might have once expected, but with a slow, sinking finality. This was not the scripted confession of a woman trying to win back her life. This was the unvarnished truth, and it was far more devastating. Why, Emma? The question left my lips before I could stop it. It was the child's question at the heart of every tragedy. Was it the money? The status? Was I not enough? She shook her head, a tear escaping and tracking down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. No, God, no. You were always enough. You were kind and steady, and you built us a beautiful life. That was the problem, I think. It was so beautiful, so perfect, and so predictable. I felt like I was playing a part, the perfect wife in the perfect house. Vincent, he was chaos. He was danger and flattery and a twisted mirror that made me feel exciting, desired in a desperate, secret way. It wasn't about love. It was about ego, my own pathetic, fragile ego. Hearing it, so plainly stated, was like having a bone set without anesthetic, a brutal, necessary agony. There was no grand romance, no epic passion that justified the wreckage, just boredom, vanity, and the seductive allure of a shiny, toxic object. "He never loved you," I said, my voice flat. "You were a trophy, a conquest, another asset to manipulate." She nodded, the tears coming freely now. "I know that now. I was just the last in the line. Claire showed me the letters from the others. I was a cliché, the biggest fool in the room." We sat in the wreckage of her confession. The noise of the cafe swirled around us, a bubble of normalcy that made our corner feel like a separate, haunted dimension. "What now?" I asked. "Now I go back to Phoenix. I'm in therapy, trying to understand why I needed that kind of validation, trying to build a life that's real, even if it's small." She finally wiped her face. "I didn't expect this to make anything better for you. I just needed you to know that I see it now. All of it. And I am so, so sorry for the person I became." I believed her. And in a strange way, it was the final nail in the coffin. The Emma I had loved was gone, not just because she betrayed me, but because she had annihilated that version of herself in the process. The woman sitting across from me was a stranger bearing a sincere apology from a ghost. "Thank you," I said, the words surprising me, "for saying that." We finished our drinks in a less strained silence. When we stood to leave, there was no hug, no touching of hands, just two people who had shared a profound crash, surveying the debris from opposite sides. "Be happy, Jonathan," she said softly at the door. "You deserve it. Claire seems real." "She is," I said. "Goodbye, Emma." I walked back to my car, the Colorado sun glaringly bright. I felt drained, hollowed out, but also inexplicably lighter. The ghost had been laid to rest. There were no more unanswered questions, only answered ones, and the answers, while painful, were complete. That evening, I went to Claire's. I didn't call ahead. She answered the door in yoga pants and an old Stanford sweatshirt, her hair in a messy bun, glasses perched on her nose. She was reviewing legal briefs at her dining table. "Hey," she said, surprised, and then warmth in her eyes. "I wasn't expecting you. Everything okay?" "I saw Emma today," I said, not moving from the doorway. All warmth vanished from her expression, replaced with a careful, neutral mask, the lawyer's mask. "I see. She's in town, wanted to talk, to apologize." Claire said nothing, just watched me, waiting. It was hard and sad, and it was necessary. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. She told me why. It was as stupid and shallow as you might imagine. She also told me to be happy, said you seemed real. Claire's posture softened slightly, but the wariness remained. "And what did you say?" I said you were. I walked over to the table, not touching her, just needing to be near. Claire, seeing her, it didn't make me miss her. It didn't make me question anything about us. It made the past finally feel like the past, a closed book with a terrible ending, but closed. This, I gestured between us to the papers on her table, to her comfortable disarray. This is my present, and I want it to be my future. But that only works if there's full disclosure, no secrets, not even uncomfortable ones. She studied my face for a long moment, searching for the truth behind my words. Then she let out a slow breath, and the mask dissolved. "I was scared you'd say that," she admitted, a small, vulnerable smile touching her lips. "And I'm relieved you did. Thank you for telling me." "The treaty holds?" I asked, a tentative hope blooming in my chest. "The treaty holds," she confirmed. Then she reached out, her hand covering mine where it rested on the table. Her skin was warm. "And maybe we can start building something that's more than a treaty."
It was a beginning. Not the explosive, dramatic beginning of a revenge plot, but the quiet, determined beginning of something meant to last. We had been forged in the fire of someone else's deceit. Now we had the rare and painful opportunity to build something conscious, something chosen, with our eyes wide open to both the darkness and the light. The following months were a study in that careful construction. Clare's foundation secured a major victory in the Parker case, recovering a significant portion of the retirees' funds. The media coverage was positive, finally shifting her public identity from Larson's ex to crusading philanthropist. I found a deep, unexpected satisfaction in being her sounding board, her strategic advisor, her quiet partner in the background. We didn't move in together. We were both too familiar with the perils of rushing, of mistaking intensity for intimacy. Instead, we built rituals. Tuesday night dinners, alternating between our places, Saturday morning hikes in the foothills, where the only sounds were our breathing and the wind in the pines. We talked about everything, our fears, our hopes, the mundane details of our days. We learned each other's rhythms, the small truths that build a shared language. One afternoon, while helping her organize a fundraising event at the museum, a different wing, a different purpose, I felt a strange sense of symmetry. This was the place where our alliance had begun. Now we were here as partners, not conspirators. As we reviewed the seating chart, Claire's finger paused on a name. "Richard Ellis," she murmured. "He was one of Vincent's earliest investors, lost almost everything. He's coming as a guest of honor from the foundation." I remembered Richard, a kindly old money gentleman who had believed in Vincent's vision. "How is he?" "Cautiously optimistic. He says the money we helped recover won't change his lifestyle, but it restored his faith that the system isn't entirely broken." She looked up at me. "It feels good, to actually fix a small piece of the broken world he left behind." It did feel good. It felt like redemption, not in a religious sense, but in a practical human one. We were taking the poison of our past and using it to create an antidote, however small. Later that night, back at my house, we were in the kitchen. I was chopping vegetables for a stir-fry. Clare was setting the table. The scene was so normal, so deeply peaceful, it almost hurt. This was what I had wanted with Emma, this simple, unremarkable togetherness. The difference was, with Clare, it wasn't a role I was playing or a stage set we'd built. It was just us, two people who had seen the worst and were cautiously, gratefully embracing the quiet best. "I've been thinking," Clare said, pouring us each a glass of wine. "Dangerous pastime," I quipped, making her smile. "About the future. Our future." She took a sip, gathering her thoughts. "This consulting work you're doing, you're brilliant at it. And the foundation, it's growing. We're getting more cases than we can handle with our current legal team." I stopped chopping, wiping my hands on a towel. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," she began, her eyes blue, serious, and bright, "that maybe our skill sets aren't just complementary, maybe they're synergistic. What if we formalized it? Not a merger, a partnership. You handled the financial forensics, the business reconstruction for the victims. I handled the legal strategy and public advocacy. We could build a firm. Carter and Larson Solutions." She winced slightly at the name. Or something else. Something that doesn't have his name on it. The idea landed not as a business proposition, but as a life proposition. It was a vision of a shared purpose, a tangible way to weave our lives together not just personally, but professionally, to build something lasting from the ground up with complete transparency, shared values, and hard-won trust. "Carter and Atwood," I said softly, her maiden name. Her eyes glistened. "I like that." "So do I." It wasn't a proposal of marriage. It was something in that moment that felt more profound. It was a proposal of a shared life's work, a commitment to stand side by side in the daylight, building instead of destroying. We toasted to it, the clink of glasses a sweet, solid sound in the quiet kitchen. The future, which had once seemed like a vast, frightening blank, was beginning to take shape. It was not the future I had planned, not the one with the 4-bedroom house and the predictable upward trajectory. It was messier, scarred, and infinitely more real. It was a future built not on the illusion of perfection, but on the solid, unshakable ground of truth, hard work, and a love that had been tempered, not born, in fire. As we sat down to eat, the mountain night pressing against the windows, I realized the final, quiet revenge was not in Vincent's prison cell or Emma's lonely Phoenix apartment. The final revenge was this: our happiness. A quiet, deliberate, hard-earned happiness they had tried to steal, but had instead inadvertently led us to find, together. The partnership papers for Carter and Atwood Solutions sat between us on Claire's reclaimed oak dining table, a crisp stack of potential. We had spent weeks drafting them, with a meticulous, almost obsessive care that spoke of our shared history. Every clause was clear, every exit strategy defined, every profit-sharing ratio debated over bottles of wine and late-night conversations. It was more than a business agreement. It was a blueprint for a shared life built with the knowledge of how fragile structures could be. Signing these feels more significant than the divorce decree, Claire remarked, her pen hovering over the signature line. A faint smile touched her lips, but her eyes were serious. That was an ending, I said, picking up my own pen. The weight of it felt good, purposeful. This is a beginning, with better architects. Our signatures, side by side on the final page, were a declaration, not of a merger, but of a joint venture into an uncertain future, with our eyes wide open. The silence that followed was comfortable, filled with the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sigh of traffic from the street below. We opened a bottle of champagne, not the obscenely expensive kind Vincent would have bought, but a solid, local vintage from the Western Slope. We drank to truth, to second acts, and to forensic accounting. The work began immediately. We converted the spare bedroom in my house into a proper office, a neutral ground. It was strange at first having Claire's presence woven into the fabric of a space that still held ghosts of my old life. But her things, a vibrant abstract painting she'd picked up at a studio tour, a sleek modern desk lamp, the scent of her jasmine tea, slowly pushed the echoes into corners, then out altogether. Our first official client was a referral from Barry, my old PI friend. A family-owned manufacturing company in Boulder had been bled dry by a charismatic CFO who embezzled funds to support a gambling addiction and a secret second family. The patriarch, a man named Walter Briggs with hands like worn leather and eyes clouded with betrayal, sat in our new office. His grief was palpable.
"He was like a son to me," Walter rasped, staring at his knotted hands. 30 years he worked beside me. I trusted him with the keys to everything. Claire listened with a quiet, empathetic intensity, taking notes on a legal pad. I asked the precise financial questions, tracing the pathways of the theft. As Walter spoke, I saw not just a client, but a kindred spirit. His fortress, too, had been breached from within. The enemy hadn't been a rival corporation, but a trusted face at the next desk. "We'll help you," Claire said, her voice firm and gentle at the same time. "We'll find every penny we can, and we'll make sure he's held accountable." Walter looked from her to me, a flicker of desperate hope in his eyes. "Why would you two care about a mess like mine?" Claire and I exchanged a glance, a silent communication that was becoming second nature. "Because we understand what it's like to have your truth stolen," I said simply. The case was complex, a tangled web of shell companies and forged invoices, but it was also straightforward in its human tragedy.
Working side by side with Claire was a revelation. Her legal mind was incisive, cutting through emotional clutter to find the actionable offense. My financial training allowed me to follow the digital money trail into its darkest corners. We were a perfect, if unconventional, team. Late nights in the office, surrounded by spreadsheets and case law, fueled by takeout and a shared, fierce determination, became our new normal. In the quiet moments, when we'd take a break and stare out at the darkening city, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't known since the early, hungry days of my career. This wasn't about making rich people richer. It was about restoring balance, about being the kind of wall that fraudsters broke against. 6 months into Carter and Atwood, we were gaining a reputation, not for splashy, high-profile takedowns, but for quiet, thorough, effective work. We were the people you called when the police said it was a civil matter and the lawyers said it was too complicated. We occupied the grim, determined space in between. It was a Tuesday, deep in the throes of the Briggs case, when the past knocked again, this time not as a ghost, but as a physical threat. I was alone in the office, Clare at the courthouse filing motions. The doorbell rang, an insistent buzz. Expecting a delivery, I opened it without checking the peephole. Reeves stood on my doorstep. He looked older, harder. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by a worn leather jacket. His dead eyes hadn't changed. A chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air swept through me. "Carter," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Reeves." I didn't open the door wider. I kept my body blocking the entrance. "You're a long way from your usual corporate intimidation gigs." A muscle ticked in his jaw. "Larson's in a federal pen. My retirement fund took a hit. Times are tough." "I'm not in the business of charity for hired muscle," I said, my voice cold. I was no longer the banker in a parking garage. This was my home, my sanctuary. "This isn't a shakedown," he said, though the threat in his posture said otherwise. "It's a warning. You and the missus, you've been making noise, stirring up old mud." "We help people who've been robbed. If that stirs mud, it's mud that deserves stirring." Reeves took a half step forward, invading my space. I held my ground. "You're playing in deeper water than you know. The Briggs case, that CFO you're chasing, he's got friends. Not white-collar friends, the kind of friends who make problems disappear. You're a problem." The information landed like a blow. We'd suspected the embezzlement was fiending something dirtier, but this confirmation shifted the calculus from financial fraud to physical danger. My mind raced. Claire was at the courthouse, a public place. She was safe for now. "Is that a threat, Reeves?" I asked, forcing my hands to stay loose at my sides. "It's a professional courtesy," he said, a grim parody of a smile on his lips, "from one professional to another. I did my job for Larson. That job's over. This is me being pragmatic. The people involved now, they don't send a guy to talk, they send a guy to clean. Walk away from the Briggs case. Let it go." "And if we don't?" He shrugged, a slow, deliberate movement. "Then I won't be the one coming to your door next time, and you won't see them coming." His eyes scanned over my shoulder, into the house, taking in the details. A predator marking territory. Pretty place. Be a shame if something happened to it, or to someone in it. The explicit threat to Claire turned the chill in my veins to ice. "Get off my property." Reeves held my gaze for a long, terrifying moment, then took a step back, tipping an imaginary hat. "Think about it, Carter. You got lucky with Larson. Your luck's about to run out." He turned and walked down the path to a nondescript sedan parked at the curb. I memorized the license plate, my heart hammering against my ribs. I closed and locked the door, then engaged the deadbolt and the chain I rarely used. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood, forcing myself to breathe. This changed everything. The tidy world of financial forensics had just collided with a much darker, more violent reality. I thought of Walter Briggs's worn, trusting face, of the employees whose pensions were gone. Could we walk away? Could I ask Claire to walk into the path of a threat I had brought to our doorstep? I called Barry first. Reeves just paid me a visit. I relayed the conversation, my voice tight. Barry swore softly on the other end. I'll run the plate, but if he's right and your embezzler is connected to organized crime, this just got serious, John. These aren't people you expose with a PowerPoint presentation at a gala. I know. You need to tell Claire, and you need to think about protection, maybe a hiatus. I'll tell her. The thought of seeing fear in her eyes, the fear I had put there, was a physical pain. When Claire returned from the courthouse, she was energized, a folder of successfully filed motions in her hand. Judge Peterson is leaning our way on the discovery request. I think we can... She stopped, taking in my face. What's wrong? I didn't sugarcoat it. I told her everything, watching the color drain from her cheeks. She listened in silence, her legal mind processing the implications. When I finished, she walked to the window, staring out at the quiet street. So, she said finally, her voice remarkably steady, the stakes just got higher. Claire, he threatened you, implicitly but clearly. I won't let you be in danger because of this. She turned to face me, her blue eyes blazing with a ferocity I'd only seen once before, in the museum cafe a lifetime ago. Let me? Jonathan, this isn't your danger to permit. This is our work, our client. Walter Briggs came to us. He trusts us. She came closer, her gaze locking onto mine. I didn't go through everything with Vincent just to be scared into a corner by some thug. We knew this work wouldn't be easy. We knew we'd make enemies. Did you think they'd all be in boardrooms?